and he helped me write letters to the Prime Minister of John Howard back then of Australia, to different members of Parliament, to try and raise the fact that Australia Post was trying to persecute a small business. And it was really funny because right at the very that went on for a long time. So talk about stress. That was a very stressful time, because if I had to sort of cancel those sites and refund those businesses, I was gone.
Be smart enough to ask for advice, but we're wise enough to ask for advice from the right people. Now, over the years, one of my go-to people in business and in life, if I'm having a struggle or I want to bounce something off someone, is my good friend Adie Reed. Adie is a serial entrepreneur, an adventurer in real life and in business. And today we're going to have a chat and we're going to go through the story behind Adie Reed, and I'm going to try and pull some nuggets out of his head to benefit you, the audience out there. So, Adie,
Yep.
Welcome to the Director First podcast, mate.
Good to be here.
Listen, I'm going to start with the easy one, right?
Yep.
How old are you now?
44.
44. Where did the story start with Adie Reed? You're a lad from Blackpool.
Yep.
Very, very humble beginnings. Give us the backstory, mate. We're all interested to hear.
Well, I was never very good at school, per se. I was always bunking off school and not really very good at education or sitting still for more than 2 minutes. So I was working from about 12 years old, doing lots of different jobs, washing cars, doing garden clear outs, waiting on all the Blackpool hotel stuff. And then my vision was always to leave Blackpool and go travelling. So that was my number one focus, really. And I did that at quite a young age. I left about 19 with my friends from school. I went to travel the world for nearly 2 years. And when I got back to the UK, I actually managed to get a job from the job centre at the company that I now own, still going 5 years later. And worked my way up there really for about a year. Then I went to the then CEO and said, if you give me 20 grand, can I go and set this up in Australia? So I moved to Australia in 2003. I set up a company there to mirror what they were doing really back in Blackpool and Poulton. Grew that company pretty much from zero. Obviously we got to quite a big turnover, about $18 million over there. And
not a bad return for 20 grand then.
No, it's a great return for the then shareholders, I'm sure. Got itchy feet. I was in Australia for 3.5 years. Decided that I really wanted to try another country, so I moved to Canada in 2007. From there, did exactly the same in Canada. And in 2010, because we were quite a big group then, with different offices around the world, I was asked to come back and take over the UK office in 2010. So that carried on for a number of times. There's quite a few partners involved back then, directors. And then I went from there to 2016. I set up a software company called that we grew out of the advertising company, but it wasn't the same model. It was completely different. And subsequently, that's grown from strength to strength. We've got some good customers like Balfour Beatty, Power Plants, Kellogg's. But the big thing for me that we created was a mental health software for schools. So we're in around 400 or 500 schools in the UK now, and that's going from strength to strength. We're opening an office in Dubai in April. We're looking at schools in Dubai and other parts of the world. So that's really the business journey. I mean, one of my crowning moments really for me, somebody coming from Blackpool, left school at 16, no education, was when I sold my company in Australia in 2016. It was the largest private sale in that year in Australia, and obviously it was a very, very tricky waters to navigate, dealing with venture capitalists and Harvard grad lawyers, accountants, etc. So that's the real snapshot of the story from the start to where we are now. Mm-hmm. Obviously, like everything, COVID hit us bad, and we've just recovered from COVID, and You know, it's really just myself and a silent partner now in the company. So yeah, we're going from strength to strength.
So, I mean, I've known you. I don't even know where we first met each other, but you know, I've got to know you reasonably well over the years, and sort of most of our chats, we mentioned before we went on air, they're running, aren't we? We'll go out and you know, we'll just chew the fat, and you know, I'm really grateful to get you here, because I know at first you was a little bit, you're not the you're quite understated, you know, that you're not big on socials, you don't really do many, you know, you seem to be that quiet guy in the background that just, you know, doesn't make a lot of noise, but, you know, the results have spoken for themselves over the years. Why do you think that is?
I've never been the showy type, so social media and everything else, it's always been in me to be a bit reserved and understated. And again, like when you asked me originally to do this, I was like, oh, not really my thing, but obviously I thought I'd come and do it and see where we go from there, really. But I mean, I have been asked to do a few other podcasts with some people you might actually know in the property game a while ago, but I thought I'd start with a friend and see where we go from there. But I always feel the loudest in the room normally isn't, you know, the smartest in the room, shall we say?
Yeah.
So that's
one of the things that I picked up off you. You know that because I'm quite extroverted by you know, by nature, but I think a lot of that is a mask.
Yeah.
You know, and it will hide that insecurity that you know that I've grown up with, of like, you know, perhaps the best way that I can get out there to people is if I'm this larger than life character. And what I've realised growing up is a lot of it was actually hiding somebody that were quite scared, quite frightened, you know, quite self-conscious, you know, what do I look like, what do I sound like? And actually that's one of the traits I picked up off you, is just to be a little bit quiet, a little bit more considered. I've never really seen you stressed.
Just very good at hiding it, Chris. Very good at hiding it.
Because with me, my head goes red and I start to touch my head. People know in my office, if that happens, best off leaving the office for a little bit. You know, the only thing I don't do is I don't have steam coming out of my ears, but you've got a great, you must have a really good poker face. I want to dive into something, because you've built multiple businesses in different countries, in different industries. What are some of the biggest challenges that you've faced?
The biggest challenges, one of the things obviously is don't say challenges, but staff. You know, you've got to get the best out of your staff. One thing I've always done is, I mean, I've had very direct bosses, and you know, bosses that talk down to you and everything else. And one of the things I always say to people, I've said it for years, is it's not a dictatorship, it's a democracy. So I always like to bring everybody along with me. So one of it's bringing everyone along, people understanding the vision, but not forcing the vision on somebody in growing a business. So that's one of the challenges. Another challenge is one of my biggest strengths from when I got my first job at 11 as a paperboy was money, managing money, cash in, cash out. You know, one of the sayings which everyone's heard, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity. Which drives the accountants mad sometimes, because I'm dealing on cash flows more than I'm dealing on management accounts and books. A lot of people said to me when I said I'm going to Australia to set a business up, I didn't really know how I was going to do it, because I'd never done it before. I mean, the first business I ever set up on my own was in Australia. It wasn't in England. But I just think you just end up just cracking on with it and doing it. When I was younger, delegation was a challenge of mine. I tend to micromanage everybody and everything else, but I think as I've got older, I've realised, you know, in the last 15 years, that someone's got to get the chance to breathe and soar, or you know, or sink or swim, shall we say. So,
one of the things that, you know, and I was just reviewing some notes I'd made, is like delegation has been big for you. That's something we've spoken about on our, you know, running board meetings, and it's something I struggle with, because I'm a control freak, you know. And I think I'm the best at everything, you know, and actually in certain areas of this business, I'm a disaster. You know, I know what I'm good at. And that's another thing that I've picked up. So when you know, talk me through that, actually delegating, you know, what it's easier. People could watch this and go, oh yeah, I'm going to delegate more. But that's not the full story, is there? There's got to be some...
No, I think there's a few things that just jumped straight into my mind. Firstly, don't expect anybody to do exactly how you would do it. My philosophy with it all has been, if somebody can do a job as 80% as what you think as good as you, then you're winning. Because then it allows you to do other things in the business, grow other parts of the business. Without that, you're not going to be able to micromanage everybody all the time. If you're a micromanager business, a small business, you're not going to grow to a bigger business, because ultimately you haven't got the time to do it. So that's one of the things that I've learned over the years. And also, you know, the other thing as well is that what I find is when I'm coming up with all these strategies and ideas, sometimes, or even speaking to staff, if they don't understand it, you know, one of the things I always say is, I've obviously not explained it correctly. Rather than saying, you don't understand me, you know, you don't know what you need to understand. It's like, well, I've obviously not explained it correctly. This is what I mean, you know, so they can actually get on the same page as it as well. Because ultimately, if your staff aren't on board with a strategy or plan or expansion or anything you've got in your head, they're not going to help push it through.
How do you find these staff, and what do you look for? You know, because there's not just you running your businesses. That's another thing that I've always noticed with you, is we have the same amount of hours in the day. You know, everybody watching this, we've got 24 hours in a day, but some people are better at making more happen in those 24 hours. So I'll come back to that question. Yeah. I want to lead with the, where do you find people? How do you train them? Because a lot of your team have come through the ranks, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, I've successfully and unsuccessfully mentored people all around the world for years. Some have been great successes, some haven't worked out. So, I mean, we do boast having staff, and we've been going since '99 in the UK, and some of our staff 20 years, 15 years, and obviously COVID was we lost a few in COVID for one reason or the other, but I feel like if I can trust somebody, then that is the first thing I look for. If someone says what they're feeling or they think, then I know I can trust them. Mm-hmm. I'd rather, most of my close friends, like school friends, are always the guys that say exactly what they think. Mm-hmm. There's no, you know, staged responses or anything else. So trust is a big factor. But I've also realised that, you know, people can't be good at everything. And, you know, I'm not good at everything. None of us are. So what I really look for is the trust factor. And I'm a bit old school. I can say old school now, I'm 44, but I'm a communicator. Like I can't not get back to somebody even if I don't really want to. Mm-hmm. And I look for that in people too. Because ultimately, if I'm going to ring somebody like a director that works for me on the weekend, it means I need something, or a message. If I send a message out, I'm look for a reply. So communication and integrity are the two things I really look for. And I think anything else can be moulded. I mean, the guy that ended up running Australia for me, you know, Paul, I said to him, as a graphic designer, I think you'll be the MD of this company. 18 months later, he's the MD of the company. I said to him, I'll leave here, the turnover will drop 15-20%, and you'll get it back and you'll probably exceed. And that's exactly what happened.
Wow. And
if I didn't do that in Australia, I wouldn't be in Canada getting something from zero to that. Mm-hmm. So that's really what I look for. People I can rely on, I can trust.
Well, when you sort of started that business up in Australia, and I know a little bit about that industry, you know, I've worked in it. It really is creating something from nothing. And I've always found that my background, my upbringing in that industry has really shaped the business person I am, because I'm not scared of a no. You know what I mean? It's like, I've always believed that because we're all in sales, you know, whether you're selling your missus on the idea of a Chinese or an Indian, you know, communication, persuasion is really important.
Life's negotiation.
Yeah, yeah. And it's always been a contact sport. You know, it's just about knocking on doors, speaking to enough people. But if for me, that is, if you was to go back to when you set up Australia, just talk us through that. You're on a different country, you're in a different continent, different time zone. There's spiders, there's snakes. You know, what was that like?
Well, I mean, talking about it now, I remember. I mean, ultimately, when I went over there, the only experience I had within the business was securing sites to sell advertising space on. I'd never sold, I'd never booked an appointment, I'd never managed an office, I'd never done customer service. I'd not done anything really, apart from get some sites in. So it was a bit chop and changing at the very early days. I mean, I was only very young, you know, 23. So we actually got somebody in to try and run sales, an Australian guy in Melbourne, didn't work out. I wanted to replicate the UK's network within post offices. I put 60 post offices installed, and then we got taken to court by Australia Post. So I was fortunate as one of the post office union CEO. He was very friendly. We're quite good friends. I'm actually going to see him in a couple of weeks. He lives in Italy now. Different members of Parliament to try and, you know, raise the fact that Australia Post is trying to persecute a small business. And it was really funny because right at the very, that went on for a long time. So talk about stress, that was a very stressful time, because if I had to sort of cancel those sites and refund those businesses, I was gone. I was either gone completely, or I'd have to ask the original shareholders for a lot more investment to keep it going. And I never forget sat in that little office with no air conditioning in the Gold Coast, where the office was, because I took the room that had no air conditioning, because obviously the staff needed to be happy. There might be about 10 staff back then. I never forget, I was talking to the MP, Stephen Conroy, the Labour MP, who was questioning Australia Post. Once a year they're allowed to question them, and it's all on Hansard. So if they say it, it's like illegal. It's like a contract. And we got them to admit they were completely wrong. So I saved the company off that basis. And I remember typing, ask this question, ask that question. I'd gone and got photos of, without going into the details, I'd gone and proven that what they were saying wasn't true. So that was an interesting time. And one of the pivotal, there's lots of sliding door moments, but one of the sliding door moments, I'd not had a day off in 2 years. I've not been home in 2 years, and I came back from my brother's wedding. And I remember thinking, do I really want to go back to this stress? Because I had like 10 staff, 5 had quit in 3 weeks that I'd left. And I remember just thinking, no, you're going to go and do this. You're going to go back. And I went out selling advertising space with no training. And I thought, how easy is this? Because, you know, ultimately I know the business back to front now after a year or two of running every department in the office that I'd never ran before. And that's how it all changed. Changed the complexion of the company, and then I formed some alliances with the Royal Australian College of GPs, which basically the Doctors Association for Australian Doctors. So I formed that partnership, and then the company just boomed after that point.
So you know, when you're getting you're getting legal action, and you know, it must have felt suffocating. One of the things that I've struggled with over the years is I'm really good in a clear space. I used to say I like pressure. I don't like pressure. I'm not a guy that likes a number of different things going on. I need a relatively clear life to be able to focus on what I'm doing at work. How do you, again, for me, it's like if something comes on, it can consume me. And when it's consuming me internally, my output drops. It just affects every area of my life. How did you handle that at such a young age, where you're getting bullets from all angles? What was the day-to-day? How did you get through that? What were the lessons you learned back then that have stood you in good stead since?
I suppose at the time you are just fending you've got a bulletproof vest, aren't you, and fending off, shots from everywhere. I think that a lot of the time, because I'm a very good communicator, because I'm quite a good communicator, I would speak to the then, who was a bit of a mentor to me, the current chairman. I spoke to them and the current partner that's still involved. I spoke to them every single day. I remember waiting until I think it was 8 o'clock p.m. was like was there. They started to get up at 6 in the morning, so I'd always be on the phone to them. I called on support when needed from the UK office, but again, it's upside down. But I mean, I'd literally at those points, I'd be on the phone till like 11 midnight every night. But again, I think at that age, it's a bit easier to manage and do it. And when I look back at it and talk about it, sometimes I realize I don't know how I got through it really. And you forget, don't you? You forget. You know, we're very good at forgetting the hard times and just remembering the good times, aren't we? So it was just a day-to-day thing, and there was always some pivotal moments, you know, in the company. I mean, the company's changed a hell of a lot. We went from offices in Canada, America, Australia, Gold Coast, Preston. We're actually sitting in an office that we used to own. Yeah. This office was our office, and then now we're just Polton. But a lot of that was because when I sold the Australian company, we literally just focused on our areas, and we didn't need. We had this office here, it was a sales office, and we had the office in Polton as the back office. But getting through it day to day back then, it's that for me. I'm ultra competitive, but with myself, I don't want to lose at something. I can't give up on something. If I've got it in my mind, I just go for it.
So that was obviously a fairly big challenge early doors, and I sort of like digging into this type of thing, because for me it's like when things are going good for me, I'm not sure I learn a great deal. You know, I learn the real life lessons in me is when I've been through pain. You know, personal pain, business pain, things going wrong, unfair things happening, where I've really got to go, you know what, and I grow through that. And at the time, it's like, I feel like I'm breaking down, but in hindsight, it's actually a breakthrough. So I want to sort of, where else has there been challenges, you know, that were early on in Australia? There's been an illustrious career afterwards. What else would you like to share with us?
For challenges?
Yeah.
Well, the most recent challenge is managing a cash flow, turning a business around that's been going for 25 years and trying to grow at the same time.
So were we talking about COVID? When COVID happened?
After COVID, yeah. Yeah, after COVID, that's been... I say this all the time, but it's hard. It's been harder. I feel like this has been harder to turn a business round rather than start something from new.
I remember our runs, socially distanced, obviously, and I remember when I'm talking to you, for the first time ever, I sensed a little bit of, I don't know if the word hesitancy was there, but you wasn't your normal self. You know what I mean? I could understand that, you know, like you say, you're a good poker player.
Yeah.
That was probably the first time I've ever noticed a bit of a change in you. But they must have been, well, tell us, you know, you tell us the business going into COVID. What was that business like going into January, February 2020, and what happened?
Well, the business going into COVID has been running for 20, 21 years. You know, I'd recently just, we were 6 shareholders, and then we were 3 from 16. So going into COVID, it was just a sort of a behemoth that's been there, for forever. And it just sort of ran, you know, we grew sales, we got new products going and all the rest of it. And then after COVID, because nobody knew what was going to happen after COVID, right? And I seriously questioned whether I really want to rebuild an advertising company again, because I'd done it in Australia, Canada, America. I'd rebuilt the UK already before COVID. So I was really questioning whether I wanted to do that or not. So that was probably the hesitation, really. And only when I decided that's it, I'm doing it, which was, what are we now? It's probably, we're coming into 2 years ago. It's, you know, that is really when I got focused on it again, realised that, you know, I know what I'm doing, so I can do this, and I thought I'll grow, I'll do what I did. But the road's been, it's not been an easy road, and it's hard sometimes to talk about staff to understand that, you know, when you have to really manage tight cash flows, a staff member saying, oh, they're just tight, or they're taking all the money for themselves, or all this sort of stuff. But when you're at the sharp end of it, as you'll know, it's not the case.
Well, you told there was a time you wasn't taking an income, was you? You was just, you know, people don't see that.
For years, yeah.
So that must, you know, probably the most stressful time you're going, and you're not getting paid for it either.
I know, and I think if I'd not been in business for 25 years, running companies, I'd be like, well, I'm working for free. And I did say it to myself a few times, I'm actually working for free here.
Yeah.
And you think to yourself, well, and one of the things that I always say is that, you know, I always class the business as a person. The most important person in the business is the business. Because ultimately, for a good few years, I worked day and night for the staff to keep the staff employed and to keep it all going. And it was only one thing as well is I've never had a loan. I don't even like personal loans. I don't like owing anybody anything really. And you know, we've managed to turn this business around with no loans.
I find that incredible.
Off our own organic money. And I could have done it at some point, could have got a loan, everything else, but I didn't want, because I'm competitive, and it would have felt like a failure.
And do you think as well, you know, running that competitiveness through that scenario, like if you'd have took, I almost sometimes think with you is, whereas I don't like the stress, I really don't, I want an easier life, right? I want you know, I've got 3 little kids, easy and peaceful is probably a big stretch. But sometimes I feel like you put yourself through it. And like for me, when you were going through that, the easiest thing would have been to pull some money, you know, to raise some money. Because I remember us having those cash conversations about cash and like in my head, I'm thinking, well, why would you not just raise some money and give yourself some breathing space?
Because again, it is that competitive side where I feel like a failure if I did that. I'd rather do it off the strength of come up with different ideas, strategies, products, staff. I mean, I went on a headhunting mission to get back some people that we lost throughout COVID. Probably because I was a bit disillusioned at the time, and I didn't really know how long COVID was going to be and whether I want to do this again. Or, you know, I didn't care about it as much at that point. But it's funny you should say that, because I've dealt with a lot of issues in recent months for income flows, because we've got 10 to 15, 20 different channels of income across different countries. You can imagine different credit card and you know, banks, everything else. And I felt like I'd solved something like a week or two ago, and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? I'm bored now. Where's the problem at?
Yeah.
You know, where's the fire to be put out?
I'll go and do that podcast with that funny looking bowl chap with specs. Got a bit of time to burn.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it's interesting how you process stuff, isn't it?
With regards to, like, you mentioned it at the start, cash flow, cash in, cash out, management information. Because obviously I deal with businesses who are generally quite poor at managing cash flow, don't really understand management information. Another thing I picked up from you, you know, I remember us, and this is probably going back to 2020, and you're talking to me about P&Ls and balance sheets, and I felt a little bit, I'm thinking, okay, I don't really know what he means there. And it forced me to learn. And today, like, the difference that's made in my business is night and day, and I'm still learning. You know, I'm no absolute expert. But can you just share with us some of those insights? Can you expand on it a little bit, where you've got accountants saying one thing, you've got...
Yeah, well, I mean, I've had this for years, obviously, we know our accountant, and obviously, you know, the booked profit, deferral of income, which is, you know, advertising, you do deferral, which means all it means is you just pay tax a bit later because it's over a period of time. You might get a little money up front on one contract, but you don't recognise that income until it's actually aired, the advert's aired. And I've always dealt with cash. I always do cash in, cash out. So one of the things I did recently is I took a lead on the income, to really understand the income, which I'd never done to this level of detail that I'm at now. I know where every penny's coming from, where it's coming, and the percentage of debt on each line. But I do things old school. I've got a whiteboard. I had whiteboards. I wrote up all the income lines. I wrote up the predictions, worst, best, and then the cost lines too. I went through all the costs. I recoded all the accounts codes to what I know and what I think they should be coded to. And I had all the different costs going out. But I always say to my MD, if we can't overspend on anything, because if we overspend, we've lost that little column there. So I always overestimate costs. So I look at my costs at the beginning of March. That's my worst case cost. That's my worst case and best case income, and that's really how I run it. It's just like I used to manage my bank account when I was a teenager. If I'm bringing in £100 a week, I'm not spending more than £100 a week. I've never had a credit card in my life. I'm very much off. I don't like. Again, it's that debt thing, owing somebody something. I've never owed anybody anything.
So obviously, one of the things that I say to people, if somebody's coming through, if they're speaking to me, that there's some issues in the business, and many businesses will have a future, but in a different company. It's past that point of no return, and obviously since 2020, in recent years, so many businesses have just been blindsided with what's gone on. They didn't have enough cash. They perhaps didn't have the appetite that you had to make a change, and the easiest route was to go through some type of insolvency process. One of the things that we do is we actually interview some really brave directors post liquidation, administration, whatever the case may be. And we're like, what's the biggest takeaway that you can learn? What's the biggest learning from this really tough time you've been through? And it's learning about the numbers, understanding on a monthly basis where your business is at. So what are the things that you could not live without on a monthly basis from a financial standpoint in your business? What are you looking at? When do you want that information? What does it allow you? What decisions does it allow you to make?
Well, obviously we've got a bespoke system, like that was done in '99. It's just been developed over 25 years, and it's still getting developed now. And I get my daily income in. We get expenditure all. It's still on whiteboards. What we're spending. The other big thing as well is we went from seeing what's coming in, pound out, to then we finally last year started to be able to accrue money finally, because what would happen is we'd have a big tax, VAT, GST in Canada and all these tax bills, and it would really hit us that month. But now income's rising, we can now accrue. So I accrue for everything. So what I mean is we have hardware, we have software, we have obviously tax bills, corporation, everything we accrue, and that builds up in a pot. I have a top sheet that I deal with, which I'm getting when I get back actually, where it'll be like, right, well, I know exactly what we brought in, I know exactly what we spent, and I know exactly what we need to accrue. And that information, that daily, I do it daily information. And it's not something I used to do. Like in Australia, sales quadrupled. Next thing I'm like, cash is coming in quick. I didn't really have to get into the level of detail that I'm into now. So I know it's cash in and out in the business. And the other thing is any bills coming when your VAT's due, when your GST in Canada's due, or GST in Australia's due. We need to know when all these bills are due, and to make sure I always try to over accrue, so when the bill comes it's less than what I thought it'd be. Mm-hmm. So it's really that cash is king, cash flow. I mean, obviously we're a group of companies. We've been an audited company for a long time, but because of the size, we fell out of audit for a year. We're back in it again. I say fortunately and unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So the accounts will be getting done, but again, I'll still be working off the cash. I've done for many years now.
What parts of your business don't you enjoy?
Of what parts of the business do I not enjoy?
Yeah, what you know, there's things we're naturally good at. What
Staff parties?
Staff parties.
No, I mean, I obviously used to enjoy them, but I think as you get older, fortunately Andy, who you know, the MD, and Danny obviously, and Sam, they like a staff party, so they've picked the reins up on that for me now, because I took the staff parties to another level in Australia, you know, because obviously you're going from an Imperial De Vere banquet room.
I remember them. Yeah, I remember them.
Which are pretty soulless, to hiring out a theme park in the Gold Coast.
Yeah.
And there were a lot, and the weather's there, or a boat on the barbecues, and it was a bit, you know, I took it to another level. And I brought that ethos back here to the UK, and I think one of the best ones, they always say, I never came because my son was born around that time, but I never went to it in the end, but it was in Marbella for a weekend. So, but yeah, I think it just came to mind, staff parties. I mean, of course I do go to them, but I love the week. I like being in the office. I like getting into numbers. Crazily, being dyslexic, numbers are really my thing. Like, I can normally spot a number on a spreadsheet like this that maybe an accountant's not seen.
I mean, that was something I wanted to touch on. So my 10-year-old she is dyslexic, and like her mum was worried about it. And I said, listen, one of my mates who's one of the most successful, I says, he's dyslexic. You know, has that held you back? You know, what?
No.
When did you find out about it?
Well, I always knew back, as you'll know, when we were at school, it wasn't really identified.
Well, it was people who were naughty little shits.
Yeah, basically, yeah. So I just realised at a very young age that schoolwork wasn't for me. Sitting in a classroom wasn't for me. And my daughter's very dyslexic too. And I tell her it's a gift, because you get to look at things in a completely different way than you do if you're not dyslexic. So you find a quick way of doing something and a workaround. And that's the benefit to it, especially in business too. I mean, I was never going to be an academic. I was never going to be, you know, a doctor or a lawyer or an accountant. Or I mean, I remember just one thing was quite. The then chairman asked me to read the first lease I signed in Australia. It took me about 4 days. I could only read it one page at a time. But I did retain it. Definitely retained it.
I think it's, you know, you mentioned sort of the schooling system. I didn't. I genuinely say school interrupted my education. You know, I wasn't dyslexic. I was a naughty little shit. You know, I just rebel without a cause. And I look back on my school days and like you know, people say, oh, I wish I'm back at school. I absolutely hated school. I wanted to get out into the world. And I can't help thinking, you know, like the school system's broken. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're teaching people to fit into boxes. You know, you go back, like our parents and our parents, they had one job for 30, 40 years, they got pensioned off. That world is no longer, it's not here anymore. They don't teach entrepreneurial skills. They don't teach money management.
No.
And that's all I've got this base. So like, what are the key skills do you think people should be developing to be successful in life? Not just business, you know, what do you need in life?
Again, like I said earlier, I feel like you treat people how you expect to be treated. I mean, a lot of people that know me, friends and also people that work for me for years, will say, you know where you stand with him. So when it comes to skills in life, you got to believe in karma. We've all done good and bad things in our lives, and things we're proud of and we're not proud of, but it always comes back to bite you in the end. When my kids went to school, I'm not an advocate of education, which is difficult because you can't tell your children, don't worry about it. But it's just about being a good person. That's what I say to my daughter. It's all about being a good, pleasant person. And that is really, I think if you treat people right, you'll get it back.
And that's quite unique in business. I think, you know, I have been in business myself for I think 25 when I started on my own. So that's nearly 20 years. Most people, I can count on probably two hands the people that I trust.
It's interesting to say about trust, because I was thinking about it the other day, because I've had my trust broken multiple times by people that were high up in the business, you know, bad, you know, trust breaks. But I still say you've got to trust people, because if you don't, you're constantly, you know, second questioning what they're doing and everything else. So you have got to trust people, but you've got to be wary, like you say, that whether or not, how far you trust them.
There's got to be checks and balances.
Yeah, there has to be checks and balances. Yeah.
There's a saying, you can believe in God, but you've got to tie up your camels.
Yeah.
And I love that. But that's, I was on a podcast the other day, and like, it doesn't take, you know, like, I mean, saying in two hands, I was probably, you know, under-egging it, but you know, people in business who just do what they say they're going to do. Like, that's it. If they say they're going to be here, I know he's behind the camera, but what I like working about Jed is he's never let me down, and we've worked together for 4 years. Like, if he's going to be somewhere, like, he's never been sick. He's always over-delivered as well. Like, you know, he's fairly, listen, I'll definitely do this, but he's always given me a little bit more. And, you know, sort of leads on to another question I wanted to ask you. How do you stand out in business? You know, if you're a business owner watching this, what are the things that you need to do to sort of stand above, you know?
Well, stand out. I mean, people can tell honesty, I believe. If you're being honest and genuine, most people can tell that. Within you, it's even like when you're selling. You know, if you're being completely honest with people and speaking from the heart, people feel that energy. So that's one thing about standing out. Again, if you say you're going to do it, do it. You know, like what you just said before. There's a lot of people that say, "Yeah, I'm going to ring you later," or "I'll ring you tomorrow," or "I'll come round," or "I'll bail you over the weekend." If that sticks with me, so if you've said to me, "I'll bail you over the weekend," and you don't, I'm like, oh, he's not bailed me. It just doesn't leave my brain for some reason when people say they're going to do something and don't do it. So I just think ultimately, bottom line is if you say it, do it.
And that's it. It leads on to, you know, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to sort of steer the conversation to family. How do you? I mean, do you believe in work-life balance?
I do believe in work-life balance. Yeah, I think that when I was younger, work consumed me, and I wouldn't be able to have a situation where I'm out with the kids and I'm doing something like a water park or something, and I wouldn't be able to. I'd either have to. I went through a stage of turning my phone off on holidays for a week and taking a second phone as an emergency phone, like a back phone, like emergency phone.
I do it. Yeah.
So I was like that. Trying to switch off because I'm constantly on looking and everything else. But I feel like what I've gotten much better at doing in recent years is being able to balance it all. So literally taking a phone call or a message. It's a lot more messages these days than phone. Responding and then being back in the room with my children at the same time.
See, I struggle with that. So much so, like, I mean, I have the bat phone. I have my work phone that never stops. And it was a few years ago, I'm going on holiday and my head's battered. Like, so I got this other phone that very few people have the number to, but I've got it if I need it. And like that for me at the moment, it's like, it doesn't stop. It doesn't stop. And I found myself at weekends. So I get up early most days and I might, you know, at the moment I'm learning something and I like to get up, check my emails, perhaps do something very early on a Saturday morning that I couldn't normally do. And it happened to me last week. Like, my mum's come round and my missus out with two of the kids and she's took the baby out and I had an hour to myself and I thought, you know what, I'm going to do a bit of work. I've got something to do. I mentioned this to someone. He said, well, is that a bad thing, you're trying to do something? The problem I have is once I've opened Pandora's box, My head's alive then. It's like bang, 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 and I can't settle back down again. And it ruined not ruined the rest of the weekend. When you said you're back in the room, I really struggle with that. I struggle to go, okay, this time is done. Let's get back to being dad.
Yeah.
So how do you do that?
Well, I think it's something that just evolves over time, really, because obviously it all depends what industry you're in as well. Because if you're dealing with clients versus staff, because ultimately now mine's majority is management team staff that I'm speaking to. One thing I'm really strong on is I have a very, very, I've got OCD with time. I mean, I often joke with my fiance because if I say a walk's going to take 2.5 hours, I've never done it before. It normally takes 2.5 hours. It's a bit freaky. I did it at Keswick at the weekend. When it comes to time, I've just seemed to always know the time, even without looking at a clock. So me being that way about time, if I'm with my children, even when I was on my own with them or in a situation, if I've got a call coming through, I'm like, I'll just communicate with them and say, I'm going to do this call, it's 5 minutes, and then I'm done. And very rarely, if ever, my children said, oh, you're always on the phone, Dad. Don't get that. Because I communicate with them, who are the people I'm with, just manners and communication. So I'm saying, listen, I'm going to do this call, I'll be no longer than 10 minutes. Or 5 minutes, and when I come back, get straight back into what I used to do. Now that's something I've started to do in recent years. It's not something I can say I was doing 10 years ago or 15 years ago. It would consume me like yourself, and I think it's just something I've evolved into. I think I greatly feel when I turned 40, I just seem to mellow out a little bit more. I don't know what it. Maybe I'm just thinking that because it's the big 4-0, but I just feel like I've mellowed out a little bit more than I used to.
What is an average day for you
then? An average day for me is I've got a bit of a routine like we all do, a bit of a health routine in the morning.
This is what I want to get into. Come on, because I want people to.
Well, where do you want to stop with it?
I want to start when you open your eyes.
Well, you know me, Chris, and obviously I've lived in Australia and everything else, and I've done every therapy you can imagine, and I've done every treatment you can imagine, and my day really Monday to Friday starts with 5 a.m. get up. I've obviously I've got problems with my back from years of like extreme sports.
I want to come into that in a minute, but yeah.
So I've got a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, so I jump in that in the mornings, nod off a little bit sometimes. When my back's fine, I'll get up, I'll do all my vitamins, everything else, then I'll just do some training ordinarily. And again, it all depends because I have my kids obviously part-time. So if I've got my children, I'll do the school run. If I haven't, I won't. I'll maybe do a bit more exercising. And then obviously I go to work. I go to the office. That's really, and it all starts from there.
And let's get into that then. What are you doing when you're going into that office? How does the day develop?
Every day is different. I do, because I've got an MD that's doing a fantastic job. He runs it with the sales directors as well. I've found as I've got a bit older, and as I've got an MD in place, which I've never had before, it's always me. I'm going into the office for short spells and doing intense strategy meetings and coming in. Sometimes it's easy when you come in outside in, getting an overview of everything, more of a holistic approach, and seeing problems that if you're in the trenches, you don't ordinarily see it, because I've been in the trenches for 20 odd years. So my day mixes up with that. I've obviously got other things. I've got properties. I've got, I was involved in a bar chain for a number of years, which I'm not involved in anymore. So that took up some time. Lots of different, no week's the same. I travel a lot. I went from traveling every 6 weeks before I sold Australia, around the world tickets, everything. When I sold Australia, I went back to just traveling to North America. And I'm back since in the 6 months because of the Dubai expansion. I've been traveling a lot again. So a lot of my time is traveling and going to meetings. I've got things going on down in London. I've got other business relationship and friends at networking events that I go to. So I could be literally in the office 9 till 5, or I could be on the road from 7 and back at 7. So it's all dependent on how the week really goes. But I'm always having dinner at 6:30 with the family.
Okay, so
Always.
that's a non-negotiable. You want to.
Yeah, and I'm very big, which my kids will say now they're at phone age. I don't want a phone on the table.
Yeah.
And if it's on there, they've got to turn it over and turn it on silent.
I get it. No, I like that.
So I've been very strict with my children watching. For me, two things I was strict as a father: bedtime.
Yeah.
Is this time, and eat all your tea, and you're sitting down eating with me, and those are the two things.
Mate, it drives me mad.
And it's the hardest thing with the kids, especially boys.
Oh, well obviously my kids, and it's there's 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 10-year-olds on the phone. We had a right do the other night at the horse because she's trying to sort the horse out with the phone and she's camera and it. There's no point being at a table if you're all eating, you're all on your phones. It's like I might as well be eating on my own, but it is a hard thing to. It's remind like that. The little one's feral. She is absolutely wild, Faith, and like if you give her an habit, she'll just settle down for a little bit. But I sort of struggle. I'm struggling with that point right now at home, and it's trying to get everyone to buy. Yeah. Or it crossed my mind the other night to do something really extreme and go and smash all their iPads in the garden. But I didn't do that, thankfully. I think a bit more now. I want to move on to. How do you switch off? How do you relax?
Well, in my 20s, it was snowboarding, anything that I had to focus on. That was what I used to say to people in my 20s, oh, how do you switch off? Oh, I'll go try and go snowboarding. Because obviously living in Australia, you're not far from, hills in New South Wales or so.
Is it snow in Australia?
Yeah, Thurbo.
Okay, I didn't know that.
In the Blue Mountains behind Sydney. But there's also, obviously, New Zealand's just on a doorstep. 4 hours on a flight is doorstep for Australia. So there's that. And obviously I lived in Canada, so I went there. So I was really into snowboarding for a good long while. Self-taught, probably done all these injuries to my back, one of the main causes of the bloody injuries I've got. And, that was really a time to switch off. But the biggest thing, let's be honest, the biggest thing is exercise. Mm-hmm. No one is going to sit here and say that exercise doesn't make you feel good, releases dopamine, just get out and do something. Even when I've had a bit of a flare up in my back and it's overdoing it when I was on holiday running and trail running, that's what I've done, that's why I've done it. Even just going for walks. Now I used to not do that because I think it's not very adrenaline walking, but even now I'll go for a big long walk, even if I walk an hour to the office. Mm-hmm. So to switch off truly is that. I can't switch off, and I've struggled to watch anything on TV anymore. I don't know if that's an age thing, but movies, series, I just struggle with that. So truly switching off, it would be exercise. I went through a big phase, as you'll know, of 3 peaks multiple times, big walks up the mountains. That can switch off. Climbing, all sorts.
Does it, when you have these, your exercise, do you find that creates a little bit of space in your brain to solve problems and get perhaps a bit of inspiration?
Well, it's funny you should say that because, when there's been stressful times recently, people wouldn't know it. They'll know if to watch this now, but a lot of times I'd disappear on a Wednesday. I was in the lakes on my own with the dog walking. Mm-hmm. Back when there was no signal really. In the lakes.
Brilliant.
And I'd go and do Scartfell or Big Mountain, 5-6 hours on my own always. And it'd be amazing when you come back down how you feel refreshed. You're refreshed and you see people say it's always good sleeping on it, which is true. But going and doing something like that you wouldn't ordinarily do, is also really good to refocus.
And I want to sort of, obviously I'm mindful of time, I could talk here all day with you, but one of your recent successes is the helping with mental health in schools. Because, listen, we've all had battles with mental health. It's like, I think different degrees. Mine has always been probably self-inflicted in my younger days. But I've had days when, I stopped the partying and I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders, and it's been obviously having friends like yourself who I can talk to and I can share those problems with have been really, really helpful to me. So first of all, where did the idea come from for the software? Could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, again, I'm not one to take the credit for it because it came from it was an idea from our lead designer. His wife worked in schools and they had mood boards for children, but obviously they had no way of managing the back end to see patterns in children. Like if a boy comes to school and he's down on a Monday, is it because he's left his dad he's not going to see him for a weekend? So it was all the analytics in the background that was really, we created that. So we took it from a mood board, which you move because they've got to see if the children are all right. They've got to tick boxes and make sure to preventative care rather than reactive care, and that really was born out of that. He came to me about it. I love the idea. Mental health is obviously very important. I went to school in the centre of Blackpool, which is a pretty rough school. A lot of us had no dads, no single parent brought up by our mums and stuff, and it's something that is I think very important, and it's really grown from there. So we provide obviously schools with kinetic energy equipment, which is like a reactionary thing, and we also provide nearly 100 prisons in the UK now with that to keep the prisoners' mental health a bit more on check, because it's something they can go and do. Mm-hmm. So it's something that I'm really proud of the team who's come up with the ideas and implementation of it, of all that. And it's something that is expanding quickly into different markets because there's a need for it.
Yeah. Adie, today's been great. Yeah. I want to wrap the interview up now. Yeah. What's the one piece of advice you would give somebody watching this in life?
Just don't give up. It's that simple. If you've got a dream, just go for it. Because you can live a life in regret, but if you go for your dream, at least you've tried.
Brilliant. Where can people find out a bit more about you if they want to?
Well, LinkedIn maybe. Okay. I am on LinkedIn. So a bit more on probably LinkedIn, I would say.
LinkedIn, Adrian Reed on LinkedIn, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Listen, once again, thank you for today, mate. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
So thanks for joining us on another podcast for Director First. If you want to see another interesting interview like this, or you want some more information on business rescue, turnaround and insolvency, go and hit the next video that's going to be about there. Thanks for your time. God bless.